Hey everybody, welcome to Strictly Speaking. This is our Conversations with Theater Makers. My name is Jayme Mellema and I am the resident scenic designer at NC State University Theater. Tonight we have international scenic designer Charles Murdock Lucas. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Murdock, because I've always known you as Murdock.
Hey Jayme, thanks for having me.
Hey, so how are things going? How are you doing? Are you still working on projects? Shows?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Me personally, I'm fine.
Good.
Had some shows and projects canceled and postponed, which is really unfortunate. Some exciting things with different people. And then we have started picking up with work. I'm designing 3 different song cycles for the Eastman Opera Theater that they're collections of solo works. Some of them come from the world of opera, some are just operatic in nature. And we're working directly with the composers and with the performers, and it'll be, depending on the piece, it's like 5 soloists singing 1 song each, or 6, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing, we're filming them one by one in a theater space with lighting, with costume, in front of a big green screen, and I'm designing, somewhere between projection and scenery, I'm designing kind of digital scenic environments for them.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. It's I think the Eastman Opera is able to kind of turn very quickly on a dime in terms of production, because their shops are professional, and because of who the leadership is, they can adjust very quickly, which is wonderful.
That's excellent.
So there was a season picked, and then all this stuff happened, and they were able to adapt very quickly to, okay, we're going to have these collections of arias and songs, and we'll be able to give we'll have the singers sing in the space. Then we'll take them out of the room after we've filmed it. We'll let the HVAC cycle, and then repeat. So we're able to do it very safely, I think.
That's excellent.
Yeah. And I've got scenic and projection design coming up for a company here in San Diego, California. I'm based in San Diego. And conversations are starting beyond that, but those are the things on the immediate horizon. Yeah.
Right. And you're at San Diego State, right?
Yeah, I teach scenic design and projection design at San Diego State for our BA and MFA programs.
How is that going this year?
Well, I mean, I have great students. I have great colleagues. San Diego is a great place to work and to do theater. It's a big theater city. It's hard, we're having to adjust how we approach productions, and it's an educational program. So all these students, their undergraduate and graduate educations depend on this, and it's very important. And I just came from a design meeting for a show that the university is doing in the spring, where we, the advisors, were talking about how to approach it. It's very exciting. But as a whole, all those different, MFA and BA programs, trying to course correct for that can be kind of like trying to redirect an ocean liner, right? There's so many important educational goals that we have to hit, and we're making the turn, but it's been hard on the students and staff and the faculty, like you would imagine.
Yeah. How has that sort of changed your approach to the work that you're doing? Like, obviously you've been doing some digital content for Eastman, it sounds like, but when it comes to campus and whatnot.
Well, it's interesting. So I had to move all of my classes online, and one of them in the spring was model making. And I was pretty anxious about that, because model making for theater, it's a very hands-on course. And I put together a camera rig. I had an overhead camera that's still up there, and I had, some other things here, and I've got kind of a studio set up at home. And the students actually told me they were worried about the class being negatively impacted, but they actually found it was the least impacted of the class, because they were actually, with the above camera, they're able to see very closely, what I was working on, perhaps more so than if we were, several people crowding around each other in a room.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It actually sounds more conducive to actually seeing what you're doing.
And the exciting stuff about this fall, so I created a new class. The administration, my chair and dean were very helpful in making this happen. Kind of on a dime, I turned and created a new class that's about digital performance streaming technologies and digital puppetry. And it incorporated some stuff I'd taught before, but definitely, you know, we don't typically use streaming in theater. Now everybody does. But we very quickly were able to do that, and that's an exciting course. And then, because all of our classes, for the most part, all of our classroom classes are virtual, I'm really pleased to have people from all over, you know, from all over join the class. I have some students in North Carolina actually taking the class through a thing called Open University at San Diego State.
That's really cool. I think I saw you post about that on Facebook, and I was like, I should take that class. It sounds really fun.
It's great.
Yeah. So let's roll it back a little bit for folks who may not know. Like, so how would you define what it means to be a scenic designer, or what does that role mean for you?
You know, in a practical sense, the scenic designer is responsible for creating the environment the story takes place in.
Mm-hmm.
In a more poetic sense, you know, you get to create worlds and places and build connections with audiences through designing objects and rooms and places. And I always talk about, there's a Peter Brook quote that I really love, where he starts by talking about Romeo and Juliet and how Romeo and Juliet functionally, that show isn't possible without a balcony. That's his theory. You have to have that. Now, what shape that takes and what it looks like is open. But you know, he says that the set is the geometry of the play, that it makes the play possible or impossible. And I try to keep that in mind in working on productions always, that it's, you know, my role is to make the show possible.
Right. That's so true. I imagine you have a bit of a process in your, like, I feel like we all probably have our own sort of process. Are there parts of your process that feel unique to you, or anything like that?
You know, there are things that we all do. I mean, we all, I think, do a version of collecting image research to start with. We all have lots of conversations with the director and with our fellow collaborators. I think the most exciting version of collaboration is a conversation where people are just excitedly sharing things that they're interested in. And that happens to be around a show, and they're just saying, isn't this so interesting? And you know, it's usually very positive and joyful. It isn't necessarily always happy, but that's for a good reason, because you might be excited about something and you're taking it so seriously, and then you say, oh, you know, actually that doesn't work. Why does that not work? Let's figure it out. And that's also rewarding and engaging, even though it's not, you know, just, it's not a continual, like, yes, 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 everything's perfect, because even the stuff that doesn't work, it's exciting. It's exciting to figure out why it doesn't, you know?
Right, like working through that together. I mean, just doing anything in such a collaborative environment can be really exciting like that.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoy the collaborative conversation you know, but we all enjoy that, so.
I would hope so. All right, so I have a question from an anonymous attendee. How do you recommend people to get their professional start?
Oh, and who is this, did you say?
Just anonymous.
Oh, anonymous. Oh, okay. Hi, anonymous. How do I recommend that people get their start? You should see a lot of theater. You should read a lot. You should, you know, if you don't draw, you should make models or sculpture. If you don't do either of those things, you should paint. If you don't, you know, paint a certain way, you should, you know, use acrylic instead of watercolor or whatever. I mean, you should create. You know, if you like to use Minecraft, you should use Minecraft to start off with. Now we don't do theater drawings in Minecraft, but that constant creation is really important. You can't ever the design is redesign, right? Like you can't ever move past a bad version of a thing or a version that doesn't quite work until you've done that version that doesn't work, and then you do the version eventually that does work.
Yeah.
So do it, do the work, create whatever that means for you.
Yeah. I mean, Minecraft, that's a great example. I mean, you're still making space.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
digitally.
and
Yeah.
it's engaging your brain in creating, you know, spaces.
Yeah. So how did you get involved in theater and what
Um,
led you to scenic design?
you know, that's something I should like have a ready answer for, right?
Right?
I, as a kid, you know how like kids kind of have like, you know, this thing that's their identity, like they play soccer or whatever.
Right.
I was the kid that drew a lot. You know, always had some kind of drawing I was working on, and and then I also loved reading. And when I was in high school, I discovered that, you know, uh, that performing, I started like a lot of people do. I started performing in our high school plays. That was really enjoyable, a really fun way to engage with you know, things that we normally just read. And I also learned that I could put drawing and performing and reading, like that could all be one thing, and that thing was scenic design. And that was really exciting to me to kind of find that that confluence, right?
I had a very similar finding of the confluence. I was like, you
Yeah,
mean
what
I
was
could do
yours?
this? Well, I could do this hobby that's my theater, and I can do this other thing that I want to do, which is art, and do it all together.
Yeah,
And yeah, that was very exciting when I learned that.
yeah. We're really fortunate to have this medium that that we get to do and that we get to do with other people. We get to share with other people.
Okay, so I've got a question from Darby. Darby, I know scenic, lighting, and sound designers who also work in projection design. Do you think there's a best design discipline to study when starting to do projection design?
Hey, Darby, thanks for your question. A best design discipline. Well, my answer, I think, would be, and of course I'm going to be biased, right? You know, if you're trying to strategize how to pursue your professional career, uh, I would seek out the most training and the most experience in the field that seems the hardest first. Okay. So like scenic design, you have to have a phenomenal amount of studio skills to be a scenic designer. You have to do some version of all these things. You have to be able to draw, paint, draft, build models, 3D model, Photoshop, you know, analyze text. I just mentioned this, the studio skills first. Whereas lighting designers have a lot of skills they need to learn too. I mean, and we're seeing more and more like previs programs like Vision being used. But I made a very conscious choice when I decided to pursue a graduate program that that I wanted to do the thing that seemed hardest first, and scenery seemed like the hardest thing. And then after that, I've been, you know, learning more and doing more.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think I don't know. For me, I would think I imagine scenery as a easy. I mean, there's so much technology involved, so lighting makes a lot of sense too.
Mm-hmm.
But if in terms of like as a content creator, um, understanding art and space makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, here's the other thing I would say. So I also teach these topics, and I end up teaching people who come from different disciplines. I have lighting
Sure.
designers, scenic designers. Um, I have a costume designer in one of my content creation classes, and I have a TD in one of my projection design classes. And I tend to find that the scenic design students have a better graphical sense, meaning in terms of composition of images, because that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then lighting designers have a better sense of timing at the beginning. They have a
Mm-hmm.
better sense of timing because they work in a time-based medium. They have a better sense of emotional use of color, and they have a better sense of understanding use of texture. And
Mm-hmm.
there are commonalities. I mean, lighting designers also use composition. They direct attention, you know, like they on stage, like we all share various things, but yeah, I mean, you know, there were a lot of skills to learn in scenic design. I was like, okay, if I'm going to go to a graduate program, I'm going to go to one where I have to learn the most skills, so I can do that in a school environment rather than by myself.
Well, that brings me to Nicole's question, actually, is how did you decide on UNCSA for your MFA?
Oh, thanks. Hi, Nicole. UNCSA has a great reputation. It probably boiled down to two things. One, well, maybe more. I mean, I was impressed with the level of production that they were putting out, the size and quality of the shows they were producing. I was impressed by the fact that they had more than one. I think when I started there, they had 4 scenic design faculty, and you know, even if each person was only 25% good, like it's still, you're still kind of ahead, right? Or 50% or whatever. So and learning from lots of different peoples means you get exposed to a lot of different styles and philosophies of approach. And then probably the clincher for me was I went to a theater conference that was at UNCSA, and I saw Franco Colavecchia present his portfolio. And it was an hour and a half or 2 hours of just him telling stories about one magnificent picture after another. And I said, I want to do that. I want to study with that guy. And went to school there. Had a very close relationship with him. I talked to him just the other day. He's now on Instagram. Did you know this, Jayme?
Yes, I follow him on Instagram.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Franco on Instagram.
There's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot. A lot is true. Yeah.
He posts a lot of things repeatedly. I mean, how old is he now? I don't know. He's up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's fun. Yeah, I have one of his renderings at home in my office.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's lucky you. I have some paintings of mine that he painted on in the rendering class. He was like, no, do it this way.
Yes, he would just like start painting on your painting. You're like, okay.
Yeah. The one thing I would add to that though is like if you're looking for a graduate program, I don't know whether you are or not. I maybe you should look for a mentor that you connect with, that you find their work compelling, that you find their method of interaction and teaching compelling. There are a lot of great people out there to study with. And so, you should be able to find someone that you can connect with and that can help you pursue, that will help you pursue your artistic goals and be the best designer you can be.
Yes. All right. I have a question here from Nicholas Torres. It says, hello, Murdock. I hope you're well. What challenges do new designers fresh out of college face, either MFA or BFA? What skills from scenic design / theater world can be transferable across different careers?
Hey, Nick, thanks for coming. Good to see you. So challenges for MFAs and BFAs. I'm going to answer the second question and then come back to that. So what skills are transferable across different careers? Mm-hmm. So I think in the US, we're a little narrow-minded about what we think a scenic designer can do. Now, I think the field is becoming more aware that a scenic designer can become not just design for theater, opera, or musicals, but also design for film and television. And there's more growing awareness that you could also design for themed entertainment and corporate events. And we have a couple partnerships at SDSU where students get to work on themed entertainment projects and such. And then beyond that, so that I think is the widest kind of lens that most of the field thinks about here in the US. Also marketing and branding for stores, like definitely creating retail spaces is totally a thing where you're telling a story. It's all storytelling. But then if you go abroad, and look in Europe, scenographers are not just designing all of those things. They're also curating museum spaces. They're also creating museum displays. They're also curating and creating public spaces. And in a sense, like an architect or a landscape designer. And so across all of those things, I think there's a lot of transferable skills. And the other thing I would add too, that that I don't think anyone has quite cracked yet. What we do is applicable to video game design, and I don't think that that many people have cracked that just yet, but it's coming. So
Yeah, I agree. That's really fascinating. I had not heard about the landscape and museum space thing
yeah,
going on.
yeah.
That's really cool.
What was the other part of the question? I forget.
Um,
Challenges after you graduate?
yeah.
I
Yeah. What
see.
are fresh out of college folks? What kind of challenges are they facing, either MFA or BFA?
I think, you know, I mean, finding work, finding a place that will let you do enough work that you can support yourself and find your kind of artistic voice. And I don't mean that like I went off on a big search to find my artistic voice, but I found several places that I worked at enough that I discovered the kinds of work that I like to do and the kinds of people I like to work with. And you know, that's a challenge, but it's an enjoyable challenge to go through that process and engage with them.
Yeah, I think when you're younger, you're still just trying to like do it and do the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And so you like figuring out what it is you like to do and what it is that like how you work, that takes more time.
and I don't think that like you should spend a lot of time thinking like, what is my artistic voice? That's not what I'm saying. But you should, you know, look for places where you can do enough work that that will kind of reveal itself to you, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I have another anonymous question. Have you ever heard of anyone connecting scenic design or lighting in theater to a concert field, like working on concert stages, designs, and tours? The short answer is yes.
I left out concerts. I'm sorry, anonymous attendee. Absolutely, yeah. Concerts is also a world where, especially lighting design, but also scenery. That yeah, live events, corporate
Mhm.
events, rock and roll shows. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think of specifically of oh God, I can't. S. Devlin.
Yeah.
Yes, she has done a lot of work across all kinds of disciplines, including concerts and such.
Mm.
There's a great whole episode about her on that Netflix show about design, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now. Hmm. Um,
No.
so she's really yes, abstract. Thank you. On Netflix,
Oh yeah.
and she's someone who's done some really stunning, amazing concert designs, and has also done some stunning and amazing scenic designs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so another anonymous question. How do you find work? Do you have an agent or connections that tell you about opportunities?
Hi, anonymous attendee. Welcome. Um, how do I find work? You know, something I would say, which is advice for everybody, is, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, cold. I'm going to say cold call, but what I really mean is cold email,
Right.
to reach out to people. Um, I would also say, you know, you need to know about those places before you contact them and investigate their work and understand their work. Go see shows there. But don't be afraid to reach out. You know, there are a lot of great people in the field, and reaching out is okay. That doesn't mean they can answer 40 emails from you in the course of 2 weeks, but you know, one email a year they can probably respond to. Um, and building relationships with companies, um, and with fellow collaborators is really important. You know, I get hired from cold emails. I get hired from relationships with directors, hired from relationships with other designers. And then I do get hired also based on my portfolio. And I do have an agent in Asia, who gets me work in Korea.
Awesome. Well, that brings me to a good question about talking a little bit about how did you first get some of your work overseas? Like, how did that transition from the States to overseas happen?
Yeah, you know, designing overseas is in other countries is just it's been such a great joy. And when I don't want to take it lightly, but like when someone in another country wants you to design or work on something with them, they're like inviting you into to be a participant in their culture. And that's a really generous thing for someone to do.
Yeah.
And like in the world of opera, where a lot of the same titles get produced and produced and produced, and people know, you know, what a bohème is or a turandot is. This is true in the States as well. But like if you design a show like that for some portion of the audience, that's going to be the first version of that show that they ever see, and it's going to be the version of that show they compare everything else in the rest of their life to. And that happens in the U.S. too. That's wonderful and a joyful part of working here. But then to be invited into this whole other group and culture where they're being so generous as to ask you to do that is just wonderful. But to answer your question, sorry.
No problem.
I've done a lot of projects with a director named Stephen Carr. We're doing two of these song cycle projects together this fall. And he had been recommending me for projects that he was doing in Korea for a number of years. And finally the right thing came up and brought me in to do Bohème, and then Bohème led to Turandot, and then both of those things led to another director, colleague and friend, requesting me for Shrek the musical in Bulgaria.
Yes, I saw that.
Such a marvelous and wonderful experience. Oh, there's the show curtain. In all these places, working with the people there, it's just such an amazing joy. And on Shrek, the creative team, except for the choreographer and the sound designer, we were all Americans. And then of course the cast was entirely Bulgarian, and it's just marvelous. I mean,
That's super interesting. That show is such an American property, full of like such American.
They loved it.
Stuff, and I was like, what an interesting thing to choose to do.
And it really opened my so I have to say, like, if you have an opinion about Shrek, if you don't like Shrek the musical, it is better in Bulgarian. Like, for me, the joy of like hearing that musical seriously in another language that wasn't English, kind of stripped from all the personal associations that I have with like the movie, right? I just got to appreciate it as a musical, and it was, it was lovely performance.
That's interesting.
Because of course it was sung in Bulgarian.
Yeah, of course. That's cool. I think we have some pictures of Bohème and Turandot. See if some of those get pop up as we talk. But so obviously, besides like the language barrier, possibly. Mm-hmm. Are there other specific challenges to working overseas? Like, is the process different, or anything like that?
Yeah, there are a variety of things I could talk about. I mean, Bohème, I was working with an American director, and then the rest of the team was Korean. The costume designer was a man named Hwan Kim, who lives in Germany now, but he's Korean. And I had a marvelous relationship with the shops and the technical staff, and with Juan and other collaborators as well. Mm-hmm. And what was really funny was, I was flown out for a shop visit because I had to meet with the shop. There's a bidding process, and then the shop that won the bid, I had to go meet with them and answer questions for them. And at one point, I had a translator, but everyone else is speaking Korean, and everyone is Korean. And at one point, I saw two members of the Korean team, like arguing, like having a elevated conversation about a particular thing. And I was watching them, and I leaned over to the translator, and I said, "Are they arguing about who's going to pay for the furniture, props, or scenery?" And they said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, it sounds the same in any language. It was very, very funny. And then on Turandot, I had a Korean director, Sun Young Jung, who was wonderful to work with. And the really fascinating thing about working with Sun Young you know, I have almost no Korean. Little bits of tourist Korean, right? I would like to learn Korean, and it's on my to-do list.
I mean, if you're
Um,
gonna keep working there, it sounds like a good idea.
I had a wonderful time. So yeah, uh, and she really has, really pretty great English, considering I have like no Korean, right?
Right.
Um, but so there was something of a language barrier. But the really interesting thing was, we worked so incredibly hard to listen to each other and to pay attention to what each other, what we were saying. We literally had to, like, try to think each other's thoughts about the show. Like, I really just had to kind of, try and put myself in her brain and think, okay, what is it that you're interested in about that? And then she also did the same with me. And
Interesting.
it was just such a generous, wonderful process, because we were both so engaged on trying to collaborate together. And I think it made this show better, because there was no nonsense. Sometimes in any collaborative process, you get nonsense about people trying to, like, just do what they want to do. And neither of us were doing that, right? Like, we were just totally focused on trying to come together and think the same thoughts about the show. And I think actually the language barrier, like, made that a better process.
That's
Um,
really interesting.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Okay, I have a couple more questions from the
Sure.
folks. So another anonymous. It seems that designers are being left out frequently in this new genre of virtual theater. Any advice for continuing to develop skills and work on projects when there's not a lot out there, especially for young designers currently trying to break in?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking that question. There are a lot of things I could say about this. I mean, one, I think there are some exciting and interesting things being innovated and discovered right now that I think are valuable to us. Two, I do not think that, theater is not going to go away. Okay,
Right.
so if you're out there and you're worried about that and you're scared of that, that's just not going to happen. We're in a moment in time. We're all trying to struggling to do our work and just make our lives, frankly, and it can be really discouraging. But theater is not going away. It
Mhm.
isn't gone, and it's going to come back. And if you're a younger designer, I mean, there are actually a lot of opportunities, I think, to not necessarily practice your craft as you had originally intended, or even as you were trained, if you've done an MFA or a BFA program. But there are opportunities to think outside the box and try new things and innovate. And the stakes, I think, also are pretty low, because no one's ever seen, like, the best Zoom performance ever is happening continually. Like, um,
Mhm.
that bar keeps moving. And so, as I said earlier in the thing, like, just get out there and create, even if it's not for performance. If you create and you put your work in and you develop that ability to storytell with visual media, that's applicable anywhere. Um, and for now, it won't be exactly what you hoped it would be, but it will still be a beneficial part of your growth as an artist, is what I would say.
Yeah. I would add that, like, even connecting with other artists, even if you're not designing things, right? But you're working on any kind of project, it could be any other kind of project, even if it's not a traditional theater piece. Like, you still, like, this time is still a time where you can make connections and communicate with each other. And
And yeah, I mean, and it's I will say this first. It's terrible that a lot of people don't have work, or have much less work. That's horrible. But as a young person in the field, you know, I think you should feel more free to reach out to people and try to engage with them, because all we have right now, the most important thing we have right now is each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there's room to, as you said, to connect with people that that doesn't normally exist, and that is being created by this terrible pandemic.
Right. Well, we're doing it literally right now, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
Like this is like we would
Sure.
not be able to. Well, we wouldn't have time because I'm busy designing this and that to do this in a
Yep.
normal time, and so we're taking this time. Like we've talked with so many people in the series that so that like this is part of the way that we're doing that and staying connected, and I think finding ways to connect with people even if you're not doing the thing you would dream to do just yet will help you once it's over.
Yeah.
um Lydia is asking, what is your favorite part of the design process?
Lydia, thanks for the question. Um, my favorite part, I mean, my first answer, the first thing that comes to mind is the collaborative conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have creative partners that you really sync with, as I said, it just becomes a lot of conversations about stuff that you're both really excited about. And that's a really joyful kind of discussion that people who do not work in our field, they don't get to have. Like the stuff they talk about is like their favorite TV show or their favorite video game, or like problems in their life, or like complaining about doing TPS reports, and like, you know, all that stuff. It's so rare and wonderful that we get to have conversations with each other about stuff that we're excited about, that we're going to do some version of. We're going to make some version of this stuff we're excited about. Um, I also really enjoy 3D modeling.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of that lately. It segues fairly nicely to
Oh, sure.
some of my next questions. You've been doing a lot of that. So how did you start transitioning from doing more traditional rendering techniques into 3D modeling or digital rendering in general?
Um, I I love it all. I mean, I've been using Photoshop since like version 6.0, which I think was like 1998, right? Like I was one of the,
Yeah,
yeah,
right around there.
one of those really lucky kids who had access to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I did a lot of that for a while. I even thought I was going to be a graphic designer. And and then I went to grad school and I wanted to study with Franco. Franco was all about traditional media, and and I said, you know, I'm going to dig in and I'm gonna learn this and do this. And I did that for a while, and I love it. I love painting. Um, and then as I haven't left that, but as I've also incorporated new skills like different 3D programs, SketchUp, Cinema 4D, Maya, Unreal Engine, and so on. Those are exciting. And then I've been digital painting as well, and that is also really enjoyable to do, because the media is now at a point where the happy accidents are possible, and the media speaks back to you as you're kind of speaking to it when you work with it.
Mm.
So there's, you know, not only with the first benchmark we had to hit was like, can I accomplish exactly what I want to do in this medium? And yes, I can make exactly the image that I want to in this medium. Great. And then now we've gone past that to, can I do that? Yes. But also the new tools that we have then also will speak back to us and say, I mean, you know, like the paint pools in a different way digitally. And just like in traditional media, it's kind of like the paper saying, yes, but have you thought about this? You know, like that's, I mean, that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I confess to being a bit of a Luddite and still learning more about digital painting. I'm just kind of getting into it now, and I've had time during the pandemic. That's been part
Oh,
of it.
yeah.
And I'm excited about that. But you've been doing 3D modeling
Right,
too, and
right.
you mentioned SketchUp and some other programs. Uh, what's the process like, and what are those programs that you're using exactly?
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I kind of glossed over that.
No, it's
So
fine. I was
I,
going
I
to get to it
use
anyway.
I use SketchUp a lot. SketchUp, like if you had to pick one of those to learn right now, learn SketchUp. It's
Yeah.
got the lowest bar of entry in terms of ease of use.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very short distance from your brain to the screen. The shortest distance from your brain to the paper, of course, is a pencil. But this allows you to work in 3D. And so that's still a big part of my process. I still use SketchUp for a lot because it's just very quick. For more complicated things, I might use Cinema 4D, which I started using because it's also an industry standard for like projection content design.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's 3D modeling and animation. I've used Maya some. I think Cinema 4D has a better interface. ZBrush is interesting because it's a very powerful sculpting tool. I don't use it very often, but when I need it, it's like I need that program specifically. And then Unreal Engine, which I think we're showing some video from right now from a production of Sweeney Todd, the one that was canceled. Unreal Engine, you can do some modeling in there. There's some modeling tools, especially in terrain, but it's really, I mean, I think of it as like a reality engine. Like, I'm still somewhat theatrical when I work in Unreal Engine, but you can create literal photorealism. You can change lighting at the drop of a hat. That medium is speaking back to me in a different way of, yes, I'm getting some happy accidents, but the happy accidents are coming from like physics. Like, this is what would actually happen if I put a light here and saw the form in this shape. And I'm also, because of the fact that it can be used to be almost photorealistic, you get this finish line that constantly moves. That's really kind of addictive in creating work. Of just like, oh, if I spend a little bit longer on this, it's going to look that much more real. And it's a real-time rendering engine. So the other programs I mentioned, when they render, it can take minutes, hours, days. When Jurassic Park was made, like, I don't know, like each frame would take a week to render or something silly. I don't know what it was. But Unreal Engine, it renders live immediately with these new high-powered graphics cards.
Wow.
So I mean, you can make a material choice and see it immediately. And you can move and you see it immediately. And you can add real sunlight and you see it immediately.
Wow.
And that becomes this very kind of addictive thing of like, oh yeah, I could spend another 12 hours working on this.
I found a similar thing when I moved from drafting by hand to CAD, where it was just like, now I can zoom in and spend hours on all of the tiny little details instead of just doing a squiggle and labeling it.
That is also dangerous.
Yeah. All right, a couple more questions from another anonymous person. Do you have any favorite tutorials or resources for 3D digital art and painting?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. There's a great resource on digital painting. It's probably the best one, and it's called Control CTL, like on your keyboard, or maybe it's CTRL, I don't remember, plus Paint. And it's like a joke about a keyboard shortcut, like Control.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down.
It's it's like the best resource out there, I think. There are other tutorials that are kind of floating around on YouTube that are good and valuable, but they vary widely. Some can be great and some can be not so great. 3D modeling, I don't have something specific to point to for SketchUp, but there is great material out there.
There's lots of
Yeah, and in Cinema 4D and Maya, there's this thing, it used to be called lynda.com, now it's called LinkedIn Learning, that you can buy a subscription to, or often your local library or your school will have a subscription already.
I know that we do, like as faculty and staff on campus. I am unclear about students, but we do.
Yeah. That's a wonderful resource. And so if you wanted to learn SketchUp or Maya or Cinema 4D, I would go on there and I'd look at the latest tutorials, and there's some really great things. Also After Effects, we haven't talked about projection as much,
right.
but there's some really great tutorials on that there. And then on Unreal Engine, Epic Games, the company that makes Unreal Engine, they themselves have some really excellent tutorials on their website. It's I think maybe Unreal Learning Library or something like that. And those are all really great.
Oh, Epic is here in Raleigh, actually.
I know, yeah.
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I know them. And yeah, Nicole tells me here on the chat that students do have access here, new this semester for on NC State campus. So
use it, folks.
Yeah, I've used it. I've done some SketchUp things on LinkedIn Learning, and I've done some digital painting things on there. Yeah, it's a great resource.
Another great thing about that that system is they provide closed caption transcript of the thing as well. So like I can read way faster than I can watch a video. So I get very impatient watching videos for the most part. And you can kind of look down the thing. Oh, okay, you know, here's where they talk about this, and you can skip ahead in the video. So
excellent. Okay, so another question from Nicholas Torres. What type of skills should students be looking for when exploring graduate schools? Meaning, should we be embracing more of the digital technology while still incorporating the older skills like hand modeling, etc.? Does that affect our training as students and as professionals? What type of colleges and faculty should we be looking for? It's 5 questions.
5 questions, yeah. Hey, Nick. Good questions, though. So there are a lot of skills out there. I mean, you know, you should look for university programs that offer skills that you need in the professional world. And, you know, those include drafting, probably on a computer program, though learning how to hand draft first is helpful still. Computer modeling, Photoshop, that's the baseline. Beyond that, there are, and model making. Beyond that, I had a conversation about this the other day, and I called it an arms race. There is an arms race around skills for creativity. Because there are, you know, 2 major drafting programs, Vectorworks and AutoCAD. SketchUp is getting better at creating documentation too. So now you have to learn those. And then, but also like Rhino is really great, and AutoCAD Revit, even though that's way too powerful for what we do, but it's still great to learn. And then in 3D modeling, you know, not only is there SketchUp, but there's also like Maya and Cinema 4D and 3D Studio Max. Mm-hmm. If you had to pick out of those, I'd pick Cinema 4D. You know, I could go on, like though you should definitely learn Photoshop. That's like, you have to learn Photoshop. You're like, how will that affect your career? Like, you know, you're going to find whatever tools there are that you can express yourself well and you can collaborate well with. And if that's pen and paper, awesome. If it's Maya, awesome. If it's SketchUp, great. Like, you know,
yeah, I think what matters most is the idea, is not necessarily the medium.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, there's also a misperception that especially younger designers, but I think even older designers have too, of like that learning the skill is like learning the tool is learning the skill of design, and it's not. I mean,
right. You
can be an amazing artist in Unreal or Cinema 4D, but if your ideas for what's on stage is bad, it's still going to be bad, you know. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's what really matters. The developing, you know, the machinery and the software in here that is about analyzing a story and telling a story and connecting with an audience. That's the stuff you really have to develop.
Yeah.
You should learn skills in school. You will never learn all of them. The best programs in the world, you'll never learn all of them, you know, in 3 years. So you also, like, your number one priority should be the skills in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a little bit of time left. I'm gonna try and cram in the last 2 questions. One from Nicole. I noticed a lot of the programs you described are in common with game design industry standards. Have you ever done anything with video games? Do you think it's something that's a reasonable thing to pivot towards from live entertainment?
Thank you, Nicole. I think it's absolutely a reasonable thing to pivot towards. I have not yet met, I've met a lighting designer who is theatrically trained, who, actually, I'm thinking two lighting designers. I met a lighting designer who's theatrically trained, who designs lights for halftime shows in esports football games, uh, which I think is wonderful. And I know a lighting designer who is also just an incredibly smart person, who founded a virtual production company called Lux Machina. And they did all the very interesting stuff with LED screens and Unreal Engine and real-time rendering for The Mandalorian. Yeah, Baby Yoda. They didn't do that. They did the world that the Baby Yoda did.
Okay, I'm gonna one last one from the audience. What are some, from Lydia, what are some skills, techniques that you use across all forms of the design that you do?
I mean, first I'm gonna talk about brain skills really quick. Storytelling, analyzing a script, those apply across everything. Composition, understanding how to compose visual images. Iteration, taking an idea through multiple versions. You're never going to get it right on the first step. You've always got to do a revision. Like the idea can always be improved. We don't ever like finish. We're just done. Like so those are like the soft skills, the brain skills. Photoshop I use all over scenic design and projection design. That's probably the number one thing that spills across both of those disciplines.
All right. Our last question for the evening. What would you say to other students, or to say to students or others starting out who are interested in scenic design, like one piece of advice?
Again, I should have like a really easy pattern for this.
It's hard.
I think the creative process is a three-step process. I'm going to tell you something. I stole it from a book about improvisational performing. The creative process is 3 steps. It's do a thing, take a moment and examine it. Don't judge it. Don't say, oh, I'm so terrible, or oh, I'm so great. Just what did I do? Just ask yourself, like, what did I do? And then heighten it, expand it. Take the part that was good and make it bigger, better. That's the entirety of the creative process. That involves doing the work, examining it, and then revising it, revisiting it, growing it. And, I encourage you to try and use that very simple 3-step process in your creative work.
That's great. Murdock, thank you so much for doing this. It went by way too fast. We had more questions we never got to, but here we are. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for our discussion. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Jayme, so much. And let me just say, it's a pleasure to talk with you. I love your work. I was just on your website again this morning, and you do beautiful work.
Thank you. We're fans for each other. It's because I love your work too. So
you're very kind.
All right. Thanks again, and we'll see you all again.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.